My name is Chips, C-H-I-P-S. And no, it's not a nickname. It's my given name. My parents attached that moniker to me when I was born. And I've been explaining it ever since. And I'm not going to give you many details right now. My last name is Paulson, P-A-U-L-S-O-N. And if you're trying to look me up on the internet, you may run across my YouTube channels on the Manitowish Waters Community Church sites, older ones. Or, most likely, you will run across a famous brand of poker chips called Paulson Chips. And there are plenty of sites that sponsor Paulson Chips. I am a retired Presbyterian minister. I retired last year after serving 27 years in a church in Manitowish Waters in northern Wisconsin. Before that, I was in southeast Alaska for a few years. Before that, Southern California. Before that, New Jersey. And I grew up in the Twin Cities. And I'm coming to you online with this website called, or this YouTube channel called The Pastor's Paddle, because I'm also an avid canoeist. And most of you who are canoeists in the Northland, you probably begin your canoeing season right about now. It's mid-March, and we have 4 feet of snow on the ground. I'm going out on a snowshoe trail that I walk on just about every day, and I'm bringing my partner with. Jazz, back to me. Jazz, back to me. This is my, hey, come on, tag up. That's my canoeing partner. She's also a very zealous snowshoeing dog. She loves it out in the woods. She loves the snow. Well, last year, about this time of year, I had been retired for a couple of months, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my first summer in retirement. And I decided I wanted to do some canoe tripping. I've already taken approximately 70 trips into the Boundary Waters or Quetico or Southeast Alaska. I brought groups usually of about 8 people on most of those trips. We have crossed Admiralty Island, Kootsnoowoo in Tlingit, the Fortress of the Bear. We have paddled back and forth all over in Quetico. We have paddled in the Boundary Waters. We've paddled in Glacier National Park. We've paddled in a lot of places. But it all starts here. We enter into this pre-spring season in the Northwoods. You start getting spring fever. Winter's back has not been broken yet. We got another 1.5 foot, I think, of snow just last week, but it's getting warm enough to wear light clothing out here. And the sun's starting to shine more. It's becoming quite pleasant, and my mind starts turning toward the water, canoeing and canoe trips, and I'm starting to plan for this coming summer several trips. Last year, though, I had planned on doing some long solo trips, and that'd been a dream of mine for a long time. I've been on shorter solo trips, 1 week, several solo trips in Alaska, in Southeast, several in Quetico, and a couple in the Boundary Waters, but never more than a week. And I had the liberty and the opportunity to spend more time up paddling this past season because the constraints of ministry weren't tying me down in the same kinds of ways. The calendar was not very yielding when you're wanting to get out in the summer when that's the highest time in the church year in the tourist areas of northern Wisconsin. Anyhow, my love for canoeing began, I think it was a love for the North Woods. It began when I was a young child. I remember my first kind of awe-filled experience of going into the North Woods. My father took me up. I think we were going on a grouse hunting trip or something. We went up to the edge of the Boundary Waters near the Sioux Hustler Trail, and we were just camping up there. And I remember on the drive up, it was late at night, and the Aurora Borealis was absolutely stunning. I'd never seen it before. I never even knew that there was such a thing as the Northern Lights. And as we were driving, I had my head up on the dashboard, just staring up into the sky above me. And we didn't have safety belts back then. I don't know if we had them or we didn't use them, but regardless, I was up with my face on the dash. And those Northern Lights, it was just a curtain of turquoise and pink. It was just undulating up in the sky above me and shooting up beyond where I could see even when my head was on the dash. And I was just enamored. It was amazing, and I felt like I was in some kind of fantasy land. We got up into the North Woods, and I remember stepping out of the car in the dark and seeing the silhouette of the huge white pines, and I can almost still remember the smell of those pines. I was a suburban boy, and we had smells there too. We had the smells of the creek, we had the smells of mown grass, but nothing like the deep, earthy smell of the conifers. On that same trip, we were in an old fold-up camper, and early in the morning, there was something woke us up outside, banging pots and pans, knocking things over. And my dad went and checked out the door, and then he said, "Chips, come here." And I went to the door, and he opened it up, and right out in front of the door, just a couple feet away, there was a black bear cub. And I thought it was just the cutest thing in the world. I had all kinds of pets, and my first thought was, oh, can we keep it, you know? And I was looking at this black bear, and it was looking at me, and it just looked like a big teddy bear. And then that big teddy bear suddenly just went like this, whoosh, and swung this. It was a small paw, but very sharp claws on it. Swung it right in front of my face, probably a foot away, foot and a half. And things kind of shut up fairly quickly then. My dad pulled me back, and the door got shut. And the bear hung around camp for most of the morning. We never saw any sight of the mother, but eventually the cub took off and left, and we didn't see it anymore. My folks would bring our family up on Memorial Weekend into that area each year. And we went to a campground on Lake Jeanette, which is right off of the Boundary Waters. And there's these huge rocks that are part of the campsite, and they were bigger than anything we'd ever seen. And there were about 4 families of us that were up there. We would just go and run and play tag and hide and seek, and we were running in the woods chasing chipmunks, and we were having the time of our life, fishing for walleyes late at night and sitting around the fire in the evening, and it just was mesmerizing. And I remember on our way home from one of those trips, it was probably one of the early ones, I was in the back of the station wagon, and we were leaving, and I just started crying. Weeping is more the word. I was just weeping at this deep sadness inside that we were leaving the area, and that pain at leaving was part of the deep love that I was already developing for that area. My canoeing life began when I was quite young too. We had a cottage north of the Twin Cities, and our neighbors had a canoe that I had access to whenever I wanted. And so I'd be out in the canoe catching turtles and fishing and exploring the huge reed bed that we had out there. It was just kind of a wonderland. And so I poked around with the canoe a lot, but I'd never taken a canoe trip until I think I was 12 years old. And our church had a youth group, and they were going to take a trip to Boundary Waters, so I signed up and I went. And to be quite honest, I was miserable on that first trip. We got rain, I think, the first day. My bag had one of those old flannel ones, not very warm, just rectangular flannel ones, not very warm to start with, but when the whole bottom half is soaked for the entire trip, it does not make sleeping a pleasant experience. I would pull myself up in kind of a fetal position each night, try and keep my feet out of the cold of the bottom of the sleeping bag. And then I was used to eating a lot of food. My brother and I were skinny as rails. I'm still not very heavy, but we ate a lot. Typical breakfast, we'd have 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 poached eggs on toast. For breakfast, we'd have 4 bowls of oatmeal each. We just thought of it as normal. And we got up on the canoe trip, and poor Reverend Wright, he's making breakfast for us, and he has this little frying pan, and he throws 2 pieces of batter-soaked bread on the frying pan, and he grills up 2 French toasts, and he gives them to me, and that was our breakfast. And I remember thinking, I'm going to starve. I was just absolutely astounded at how little food we were going to have to eat. Well, the trip ended up not being super pleasant, but I learned how to canoe 75-pound aluminum canoes, and I don't think I weighed much more than that. Maybe I didn't weigh that much, but learned how to work through some of the pain that takes place on portages, and enjoying the challenge of that. I had a really good partner on that trip. We paddled together and we made a good team, and that part of it was good. But when I came out of that trip, I didn't ever want to take another one. And so there was this big hiatus between the ages of 12 and 21 where I did not go on a canoe trip. But I became a raging teenage alcoholic and somewhat a drug addict as well. And that just about killed me by the time I was 21. Then I had a spiritual experience that began the process of bringing me out of that mess. And it was a long, drawn-out process, but early on, I began taking groups on canoe trips. And the first one was a really small church we were in, and a group of guys. I organized a group of guys and young men, and we took a trip to the Boundary Waters, and we had a marvelous time. It was really great. And I've been up there at least once a year ever since then. Sometimes, well, I guided up there for one season, so I was probably out on the trail 15 times that season alone. And with each trip, I fell deeper and deeper in love with the area. The storms in 2000 pushed me further north, so I started going to Quetico and taking groups up there each year, and just fell deeper and deeper in love with it. And I came to love the art and the process of canoeing, both quietly canoeing on the lake that we live on and the streams around us, and also the wilderness tripping is what really got into my soul. Wilderness tripping. In the Boundary Waters, it's not hardcore wilderness, but it is rustic. Quetico is a little more rustic, and And I started looking forward to those trips more than almost anything else in my life at the time, and still now. I just look forward to those trips to the Northland. And I think most of you that are paddlers share that enthusiasm with me. 2 years ago, both of my shoulders are full of osteoarthritis. I was supposed to have both of them completely replaced 20 years ago now. And the right one started giving me significant problems about 2 years ago. And it became so painful I could hardly do anything with it. And so I finally went into the Mayo Clinic and ended up getting a total shoulder replacement. I said my shoulders are in terrible shape. But I continued canoeing even that season. The season after I had the surgery, I was even out. But my left shoulder is just about as bad. However, it doesn't hurt. And my surgeon said sometimes people don't have pain. It can be bone on bone and it doesn't hurt. So far, I'm letting the left one go. I can do most things with the artificial shoulder. I have to be a little bit careful when I'm throwing packs, double packing, throwing the second one up on top. That sweeping motion is hard on my shoulder. And getting the packs on sometimes is kind of a nuisance. I don't have quite the range of motion I used to have. And I have to be a little bit careful with high braces with the canoe as well, where I have to reach way out. I don't have as good of control with the high brace as I used to. But overall, I'm just so grateful to be able to use my shoulder. For a while I thought it was going to end my canoe tripping, and that wasn't the case. When I was recuperating following the surgery, I was watching videos on television or on YouTube, and I saw a lot of canoeing videos, and there were some really great ones. In fact, most of them were really good, and it felt like you were on the trip with them, you know. It was some very skilled men and women that had really good canoeing skills and camping skills and bushcraft, and they documented their trips, and I was kind of enamored with that process because I felt like I was with them on the trips. And as time went on, I was watching them and I thought it'd be really cool to do that. And maybe there's a way I can kind of continue my ministry a little bit with videos. One thing that I didn't notice too much of in any of those videos was kind of an explicit spiritual component to them. There's a deep appreciation of nature in almost any person that paddles, and a deep love of the outdoors with just about anyone that paddles, and an equation of a creating God who gave us this this wonderful world to live in. That's acknowledged regularly on the YouTubes, but the spiritual depth, it isn't there a lot of times, at least for me. I'm sure that's different for other people. There's a lot of reference to spiritual but not religious. It's been the catchword for 10, 15 years now, or the catchphrase. And yeah, okay. I love the outdoors as much as anyone else, but the outdoors is not a direct, there's not direct correlation between this good creating God and the blessing that the world around us gives us. Because this world, as wonderful as it is, as gorgeous as it is, this world that blesses us so much, it can also hurt us very, very deeply. Sometimes we get hurt simply because we do stupid things when we're in the outdoors. I call those dope slaps. We give ourselves dope slaps. We just make dumb decisions and choices, and we pay the consequences. There are other times when nature just kisses us. You know, it's absolutely amazing, And it gives you these experiences that are greater than a chemical high. Absolutely wonderful. And then there are also those times when the beauty of this nature around us can hurt us, and it can hurt us badly. And a lot of times for no reason at all. A lot of times when I've taken groups out, they go, oh, you have to believe in a God when you see all its beauty. But those kids weren't there when one of my best friends and a 16-year-old son were killed in a storm in southeast Alaska. Leaving siblings, a widow wife. Nature can hurt us very deeply as well. So there's not a direct correlation for most of us for the beauty of creation, and its always benign effect on us. Having said that, every time I'm in the outdoors, I feel like I enter into a deeper and deeper experience of it. And I've wanted to share some of that with people. And I've also wanted to integrate some of my theological background. I got my Master of Divinity from Princeton, and served 27 years in Manitowish waters, over 2 years on an island in southeast Alaska, 7 years in Southern California, a couple of years in New Jersey. I've served all over the country. I'm not a Bible banger. If you're looking for that in the pastor's paddle, you're probably not going to find it. What you will find, though, is a guy that comes to the table with some resources. I've got a theological quiver, if you will, and I carry a number of arrows of interest in that quiver. And those arrows of interest, I'm able to point them at different things at different times. And I was thinking the canoe trips themselves lend themselves to theological reflection. When you're walking on a long portage, you think a lot, you talk to yourself a lot, you pray a lot if you're a praying kind of person. You're actively engaged in that kind of way. When you're in the campsite setting up, there's things you're thinking about with that, and there's theological reflections that can come out of that, making a home, traveling from place to place, being on a pilgrimage, challenging your body, mind, and spirit. There's all kinds of things that become part and parcel of our spiritual journey when we're on these canoe trips up here. And I just want to kind of point out things that maybe are obvious that we take for granted. And so I'm inviting you to join me on this theological journey as I move along with the pastor's paddle. I don't know how. I took a ton of film when I went up there this past summer. I was out there for 8 weeks, not consecutively, but I was out for 2 weeks. Then I was out a week with my son and a week with my wife. Then I was out there again for another 3 weeks after that. Anyhow, I had a total of 8 weeks of paddling out there. And it was an interesting time. I'd never used a GoPro before. And I also carried a Olympus Tough. I think I have it in my pocket. It's a waterproof point and shoot. And it's got a little bit of telephoto in it. Anyhow, and it's supposed to be pretty weather tight. And I've used it snorkeling a lot of times, scuba diving a couple times. So I brought these cameras with, and I didn't really know how to use them. And one of the problems with the GoPro is, at least what I read about at the time, this is a 10 Hero, by the way, was that it was, I can't get my camera back in my pocket, was that the audio wasn't very good. And so I thought, okay, I'll use an external mic with it and try and get that a little bit better and clean it up. And then I found out that the GoPros have a proprietary setup, so you have to use their attachments in order to hook an external mic up to it. And their attachment is called a mod, and the mod clips on there nice and neatly. However, it's not waterproof. Maybe a little bit water resistant, but not waterproof. And early on in my trip, I had the GoPro fastened to the bow of the canoe, and the first trip I went on last year, they had a 100-year high for the meltwater in the boundary area of northern Minnesota. The dry streams were wet portage, or the dry portages were wet portages. The wet portages were streams. The streams were creeks. The creeks were rivers, sometimes class 1, 2 whitewater. People were paddling through campsites. People were paddling through forests. It was amazing how much water was dumping through that area. Anyhow, I was going across one of the portages with the double packing, and I got to the got almost through the portage, and I stepped into a hole. It was hidden underwater. Went down about to my knee and kind of jolted myself a little bit, and I thought, okay, when I come by with the canoe, I'm gonna go on the other side. So when I went back for the canoe and I was coming across with the canoe in a pack, and I went to the other side, and I proceeded to step into a hole that was over my waist deep. I just went down and under, and the front of the canoe goes plunging forward. The GoPro in the mod, the non-waterproof mod, is mounted to the bow of the canoe. It goes plunging underwater. I pull it up as quick as I can, but it's soaked. And so I spent a fair amount of time trying to get the thing dried out afterwards, over a period of several days, and there was some condensation that kind of haunted me through the trip. Had a similar issue go on with my backup, which was the tuff. I must have got some kind of grit into the O-ring, and I got moisture in there as well, so I had condensation in the lens in that. So I was in this situation that was rather frustrating. I had a ton of batteries with me. I had all kinds of charging equipment with, so I had plenty of ability to film. However, I had cameras that were not functioning very well, and at any time I thought I might lose them, you know, something short out and just not work anymore at all. Well, eventually I got them pretty well dried out, and I continued using them on the trip. I also was not used to I should have been looking at my GoPro films as I came out of each trip, but I didn't. I waited till the end of the season when I had a ton of stuff, and then I went in there and I discovered some things that were rather unique about the GoPros. One is the way that they elongate distances, and I had some wildlife shots that I was extremely disappointed with. I had one where there's a bear up in front of me, a black bear. It's swimming across the water, and I'm narrating it. I swing the camera around so it's pointed at it, and I'm talking about this bear swimming up there, and I'm getting closer and closer, and then it hits the shore, and it climbs up into the brush, and I'm talking about narrating it all along. And when I went back to look at that film, you can hear me narrating, you can see the water, but you cannot see the bear. It's too far away to be focused on. And I had a similar experience with some other megafauna. Some moose were just too far away to get picked up by the camera. So I had some frustrating experiences with the GoPro. Nevertheless, I've got a fair amount of footage. I've got some theological reflection. I'm going to try and pull some of that together to share with you on the Pastor's Paddle. And maybe I'll be able to continue this process and with upcoming trips as well. The backdrop that you're looking at right now is a river that feeds into the lake that we live on. And this river, it's fairly shallow. Toward the end of summer, it's hard to paddle in, but in the early spring, it's very navigable, and spend a lot of time on it. And I spend a lot of time on our lake paddling. I have a fleet of canoes, and each of them, as those of you who have multiple canoes, you know, each one's kind of special in its own way and for its own special purposes. The canoe that I used this past summer was a North Star Polaris, and I stripped it down, took the seats off, put a kneeling rail in instead, put some extra thwarts in, added some posts for booms for the GoPro, made up a spray skirt for it when I got into bigger water. Ended up using a double-bladed paddle for a lot of the trip. I love the aesthetics of a single blade, but man, they're not as efficient as a double-bladed paddle is. And especially if you're in a wind and heavier water, the double blade was a godsend. Anyhow, I paddled just about every day in the summer. I'm known on our lake as the canoe nut. And I just love going out there early in the morning or late in the evening, sometimes at night. And so I paddle out here a lot. And then when every chance I am going to get now, I'm going to be heading to the North Woods as well to do more wild country paddles. And I would enjoy taking you with and sharing some of my thoughts. Thanks for taking the time to listen. Till later. God bless.